Thank you all for joining. Really thrilled to have this group together today. I think this is the first joint meeting of APTA and NHSA's membership, and we're really excited about the conversations we've been having at Civic Mapping Initiative with both of these best-in-class industry associations, and really excited to get feedback from you today and identify more ways we can all be working together to support mobility and access for all folks, but especially for our Head Start families and their children. So today we're going to kick off with Victoria Jones from the National Head Start Association and Art Guzzetti from APTA, and they're going to share a bit about their organizations to do a nice cross introduction. Our attendees today are about half NHSA members and half APTA members. And so we'll do a few minutes of that, and then we'll introduce Amanda Bryans from the Department of Health and Human Services. And then Victoria and I will rejoin you to share a bit about this joint project that we've all been working on together. And then, of course, we'll have time for questions at the end. And so with that, pleased to hand off to Art.
Hello, and thank you, Abigail. Art Guzzetti, I'm Vice President for Policy and Mobility at the American Public Transportation Association, APTA. As you see here, APTA's roots go back to 1882. We were just before the internal combustion engine people. So we've navigated a lot of change along the way throughout the many decades. We've served all that time as the trade association for the North American public transportation industry in all its forms, horse-drawn, streetcar, etc. But we are a big tent. We're bus systems, rail systems, large and small, north, south, east, and west, paratransit, all of those things under a sort of a common collective bond of public transportation, commuter rail, intercity rail also. So it's all part of what we call public transportation. Now, let me say, also in the way of introduction, public transportation, among its attributes, is the great social equalizer, providing access to jobs, access to healthcare, access to education, access to opportunity. So we wear that charge proudly. We're so pleased to be collaborating, in this case, with the Civic Mapping Initiative, with the National Head Start Association, and through extension with the Federal Transit Administration and with the Department of HHS and the Head Start Office. And finally, I'll say that there is a big effort here to make sure we're covering our bases, to make sure there's the Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility. There's the National Center for Mobility Management bringing new energy to these types of partnerships. So much more to say during our webinar, but that's just a preview of APTA and what it is. Thank you.
All right, and I'm Victoria Jones. I'm the Senior Director of Data at the National Head Start Association. And I wanted to give a little, just brief context for those who aren't super familiar with Head Start itself. Head Start has been around since 1965, part of an initiative by President Lyndon B. Johnson at the time, and is kind of our nation's commitment to children all across the country. We provide, the people who provide Head Start do kind of the traditional education services like you think of in a center-based or home-based kind of context, but they also do comprehensive health supports, nutrition, support for families as well. And so then leading into what NHSA is, NHSA is a membership organization of all of the grantees or grant recipients who provide Head Start services around the country. There's about 1,600 of them all throughout the country, representing every congressional district in the US. And they serve nearly a million children and families every single year. So as far as NHSA, our real effort is to support these organizations with everything from policy to advocating for more funding to the kind of professional development, effective practice support that helps them do what they are doing in centers all across the country every day. So our vision as NHSA is to lead We like to put these slides up. It's to be the untiring voice that will not be quiet until every vulnerable child is served with the Head Start model of support for the whole child, the family, and the community. And then we advocate for policy changes to ensure that all vulnerable children have what they need to succeed. And then on the mission side of what we do, we work very hard to coalesce, inspire, and support the Head Start field as a leader in all of early childhood development and education. So there are a lot of pieces that go into that, but I will let you read those on your own and pass it back to Abigail.
Great. Thanks, Art. Thanks, Victoria. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Amanda Bryans from the Department of Health and Human Services and the Office of Head Start.
Hey, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here. I want to thank NHSA and also the Civic Mapping Initiative. I have worked in Head Start for a really long time. I worked in a local program in upstate New York for a little over 10 years, including 5 years when I was the director and oversaw transportation services. And then I've now been in Washington working for the Central Office of Head Start, which is an administration for children and families. And as Abigail said, part of Health and Human Services for over, oh boy, probably 24 years, I think. So I believe in transportation. I think transportation services are one of the most fundamental things we do to improve access for the children most in need and their families to be able to participate in Head Start. And my experience has shown me how much of a difference Head Start makes in the lives of so many children and families. It's really changes the trajectory for children. Head Start programs used to provide a lot more direct transportation services than they do now. We're currently we're transporting on probably 100,000 fewer children than we did a little over a decade ago. And that's because of cost and perceived risk. So I think any work that we do to sort of raise awareness and think about all of the potential we have for transportation services across, public transit, community transit, partnerships with providers such as school districts. My hope, my dream is that every community thinks about all the children they have who are eligible and considers how they will ensure that those eligible in the program. We only serve about 40% of all the income eligible children, but making sure that those slots are reserved for the families with the greatest need, and that the community is thinking about how they get to and from the program every day is just, again, that's the dream, that is a thing that happens locally and that is supported by our policies and our operators across the spectrum. So I'm really glad to be here. And I, again, thank you all for coming as well.
Thanks, Amanda. I know that we all at APTA at NHSA all really appreciate the engagement and support we've received from you and your colleagues at HHS and from your colleagues also at FTA at DOT. It's been wonderful to have you guys with us as we've built this partnership across industries to help support the 1 million children a year and their families who try to get to Head Start. And so now moving forward, thrilled to introduce a little bit about the Civic Mapping Initiative. So CMI is a project of the Selden Herring Smith Foundation, and we are charting the proximity of public transit stops to public services. So we are building national data sets, so essentially lists of key civic locations and key civic assets and their geolocations. And then we're identifying last mile transit opportunities. So looking essentially at places where the key location is close to public transit, usually close to a fixed route transit stop, but just beyond walking distance for the target population. And then we're partnering with transit agencies and with civic assets to do research, to do media outreach, and to highlight these opportunities for economic and social mobility, and ideally address them. We are, again, focused on what we think of as this low-hanging fruit that is easy, hopefully, to fix and has disproportionate impact on mobility and access. So our initial project was focused on community and technical colleges. 19 of those maps are now public. And here's a little sampling of how that's gone. our focus is genuinely, as I said before, to highlight these opportunities for expansion. We're not doing accountability indexes. We're not grading anyone's paper on this. We are looking for cases where this is working and looking for opportunities where it could work to support our collective goals. So, as we did the community and technical colleges, that project is ongoing. But of course, what brings us here today is our project with NHSA and with APTA. We have built our new Head Start transit map, which maps the location of every Head Start in the country, almost 17,000 unique locations, and their proximity to public transit stops, only looking at fixed route. And so we are going to publish that map along with an accompanying brief and conversation guide for October 2023, which is Head Start Awareness Month. We are to be completely transparent with all the folks on this call. We are not only seeking to share this information, we are hoping to highlight cases of new stops that have opened or relocated closer to Head Start centers to ease transportation burden, not only on the families that use those centers, but also on the staff who work at those centers. And so that is an ongoing project in particular for me, Art, and Victoria to help share this information with transit agencies and with Head Starts to bring them together and to help hopefully cross-fertilize and find ways to get to solutions for communities. In addition to the two projects that I've shared so far, as we look ahead, we are continuing to map the proximity of other core civic locations. Here's a sampling of what we're looking at for 2024 and beyond. So we've been particularly excited to have these deep conversations with APTA about what's important to the APTA membership as folks are planning their routes, stops, and schedules moving forward. So bringing us back to Head Start, of course, the kickoff research question for this project was, are Head Start locations transit accessible? Victoria will share more in a moment, but NHSA did a study last year where they found that transit is the #1 barrier to retention and enrollment in Head Start, which of course is a well-known program that has tremendous impact, as Amanda shared. And these findings are backed by, the Office of Head Start, which has similarly found that transit is a huge barrier, or conversely, a huge enabler where it does exist, of access for families and staff. Victoria, I'll hand to you now.
Yes, and so what we found through this work and this amazing tool that Abigail and Matt brought to us was that only 40% of Head Start locations are within walking distance of transit right now. And, with the work Abigail did with the community colleges and some other organizations, we're thinking about accessibility for the majority of people as within, I think you said half a mile or a full mile of walking distance. No, but for everybody else.
Oh, for community colleges, yeah.
Except for Head Start, we are dealing with pregnant women and children birth to age 5. And anybody who's ever tried to get somewhere with a toddler who insists on walking, or a toddler who just refuses to walk as well, knows that a mile or half a mile is not accessible. Or if you're, pushing a baby in a stroller, carrying a baby in a carrier. So we have defined that as 0.2 miles is accessible via kind of the nearest public transit stop. The exciting piece and the kind of real potential for improvement here is that additional 30% of locations that are less than 5 miles from transit, but are more than 0.2. Meaning there is public transit in the area. A whole portion of these are within 1 mile, but above 0.2. And so it's not a drastic change to think about, could we tweak those routes, the fixed routes, to make these accessible? And also, how do we kind of get this information out to programs as they're selecting where they're going to open centers, and how to best support the community? So how do we improve transit access for families and staff? I jumped a little bit ahead myself because we're just so excited about this. So from the Head Start perspective, we're really thinking about the work that programs can do to support their community and kind of bring this to the forefront. So kind of pulling together information on their centers, their hours of operation, what routes are used by families and staff. So where families and where staff tend to live, and then where their centers are and what routes and things like that are accessible to them, or are they having to make multiple switches on buses to get from one side of town to the other? And then similarly, to engage more with transit agencies, help them know what the needs and priorities are of their communities, thinking about access and where there's room for improvement, both from the transit agency side and from the Head Start side as they're perhaps selecting new sites, thinking about partnering with another community resource that may have space that they could use. And so then from the transit provider side, thinking about bringing the Head Start locations into your discussions about your priorities and the route changes, not just route changes as well, thinking even about schedules. And it may be that you don't need the route to change every single time it goes through somewhere, but thinking about how that timing schedule does or doesn't align with the start and end of the school day or the work day for families and parents. And then finally, bring in Head Start providers, have them pull in families. Head Start engages with families in a really, really unique way. They are part of program governance. They are true partners in what's going on in the centers. And so Head Start programs can bring in those parents to really speak to what their experience is, what their needs are, what's working well for them, and what could be improved. And so to bring them in for those conversations to think about how we can work together to support everybody.
And building on that, Art and Victoria and I are thrilled to be helping to introduce folks to their local partners and to connect transit agencies on this call or Head Start operators on this call with their local counterparts to help kick off these discussions. We've had a couple of these so far. They've been warm, welcoming conversations focused on joint problem solving. And again, identifying places where this is maybe not that complicated once the lines of communication are open. Art, would you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I would just say there's, a multiple factors that go into transit routing and scheduling. In fact, some of them, Abigail, you mentioned before when you talked about, affordable housing, et cetera, locations. But I'm thinking what this tool can do, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Hopefully some of those factors have already been part of the planning. But the new tool brings new data to the table. It brings perhaps a conversation starter to the table. Hey, look at this map. Here's a few things maybe we can do better and work more closely with our community partners. So that's the way I would see it. There's already a science underway, but this is a way to enhance it further.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the avoidance of doubt for folks on the call, we have been sharing CSV files of the Head Start locations out with transit agencies because often they're just not in the systems yet. These are typically smaller centers. They may be co-located with other more major infrastructure, but they're not always called out. They've not always been mentioned previously. And so even if the values are there and to Art's point, the planning has been there, sometimes these locations have literally just not been flagged for agencies that are really excited to have them and include them in the discussion. So, and we covered this slide a little bit already, but flagging it again here, we are thrilled to be sharing this information, identifying opportunities, and most importantly, connecting you with your local counterparts. We are by no means advocating that you look at our maps or our resources and make any changes at all on either the Head Start or the transit agency side. We are hoping that, as Art said, this is a conversation starter for folks to get more granular about how things work in their communities, because this is a local opportunity. So zooming in a little bit on just one example so folks can see how this might work. We pulled the data for Michigan for this call. So in Michigan, there are 698 Head Start centers that are not home-based. We can't include home-based centers in the data for privacy reasons. A quarter of these are less than 1 mile away from a bus stop, but just beyond walking distance. So in practical terms, the bus stop is 2,000 feet too far. But with modest changes, there's 173 opportunities to make this a little easier for families and for staff. And that's just looking at this yellow wedge, which is the primary opportunity wedge that we're talking about here. So zooming in on Lansing, we thought was a particularly interesting example because in Lansing, there are 4 Head Starts that are more than a mile away, or that are less than a mile away from a fixed route stop, but they're co-located with other core points of interest. So one is at the local Michigan State University campus, and 3 are at elementary schools that are operational. And so while a Head Start, may not have so many people coming to and from each day, even once you add up faculty, staff, and families, these Head Start, these co-located infrastructure of the university and the elementary schools, in fact, have frequently have more folks coming to and from who are either current or potential transit customers. So we are thrilled to partner and to be helpful however we can, hoping that we can surface more opportunities to not only improve transit access for everybody, but also to think about it specifically for October 2023, when we'll have a special opportunity to highlight folks who are able to take the lead on this in this autumn. So if you are, and you can see we even have an icon with a little Halloween marker to remind everybody that it's October. But so if you are interested, Art, Victoria, and I are at your disposal to help make these links and to share more information. Dr. Crespi, my technical lead, who is overqualified for this next task, is going to drop all of our contact information in the chat for you to engage with. And so I know we've finished in probably record time here, but we are thrilled to leave so much time for questions and to dig in with you.
Yeah, Abigail, maybe I'll throw one out
Yes.
to begin and get things going here. The data sets that drive this, is there a way our respective associations can help there? Is the data you have up to date? Is it as complete as you would like? Is there a way our respective members might be able to help on that aspect of your mapping?
That is a great question. And I think speaks a little bit also to one that we have in the chat right now. So the way on the fixed side of where do we to get the core stops or the civic points of interest. So in this case for Head Starts, HHS lists the location of every center-based Head Start in the country on their website, and they update it, I think, daily. And so the current map is based on a download from March. And for this October, the final map will be based on a list that we download in August, because that'll give us enough time. There's some deduping to do there because some locations have multiple Head Start grantees there. They may have an early Head Start and a normal Head Start, and so they will be listed twice. On the transit side, the way that we've been locating the nearest transit stop has been to use the Google Places API, which is built on top of GTFS. And so our map is the most accurate in places where the transit agency has been participating in GTFS. We're very excited about the changes coming next year, where GTFS will become a more universal concept. And so we expect that we'll be able to produce maps of more topic areas with much greater speed starting next September, if all of that is online as expected by the folks at FTA. There is an absolute gap in the maps in that we do not include demand response transit. That's not published in any kind of consistent way. And so we've not been able to include it. One of the ways, though, that we do think about that for this project is that not all demand response transit will accept very small humans as passengers or allow car seats to be easily installed. And so for other topic areas and other concepts like community college access, demand response is perhaps a better solution than it is for a population that's inevitably going to need to travel with a car seat if they're not using a larger bus. I see a question in the chat about thoughts about rural and suburban regions, which is a great question. We have seen a lot of these yellow nodes or these opportunity nodes actually in suburban areas. So by no means is that going to be a universal solution, expanding fixed route, but we do see a lot of opportunity there as well. Mary, I think you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I apologize. I did have a meeting run late, so I came on about 5 minutes after this started. So I apologize if you already answered this. And I'll also say, as someone who previously rode the bus with my kids when they were little, and now I work at a transit agency, I'm just like, oh my gosh, yes, I love it. One of the things as a transit planner that I'm taxed with sometimes is showing kind of the value proposition of our service and the missed opportunity for people who, like you mentioned earlier, the number of people who can't access Head Start because they don't have transportation. And as much as I hate to have to put a dollar sign to everything, but do you have dollar signs to that to be able to say, you know, a child who is low income and is not able to access Head Start, that is a cost to society or a cost to their further education at whatever, $20,000, $30,000. And then we can take that and say, look at how much it costs to add service. This is clearly the benefit outweighs the cost. I know it's like really nerdy stuff, but it's stuff that it's numbers that I need.
You're in the right place for that kind of nerdy question. I think Amanda wants to answer it.
I do. It's not nerdy at all. It's hugely debated. Many of us believe that there is a large body of data from all different sources, big meta-analyses that show really distinct and impressive economic benefits for children who attend the Head Start program, that things like more likely to get more education, including college, much more likely to graduate from high school, less likely to be involved in the juvenile justice system. We even have data showing that children who themselves went to Head Start are less likely to use corporal punishment with their own children. So people have talked about the 2-generation benefits, but that seems to be evidence of a 3rd-generation benefit. And even things like more likely to pay more taxes and to own a home. There are also lots of debate about whether or not there are short-term benefits and whether we actually know how to measure those or know what they mean. But I think that I've heard everything from for every dollar you spend, there's a adjusted $7 in savings to even $14 in savings or more. And again, you can also find people who say that Head Start costs more than childcare and doesn't work any better. But I think we have a lot of the long-term data that contradicts that. Victoria's nodding. I'm your staid federal civil servant. She may offer an even more unequivocal answer, but I'm not equivocal. I don't want to sound equivocal. I've personally seen these incredible stories. Can I tell one short story, Abigail?
Go for it.
It's a story, so it's not, representative, but a long time ago, I went on which one? Oh no, I want to tell this one. I was giving some kind of talk in Washington, D.C., and someone came up to me afterward and said, Amanda, you don't remember me, but you hired me and your Head Start program to be a bus monitor. I had been a teen parent, and when I was involved in the Head Start program, I'd already had 4 children. I think she was in her very early 20s at that point. And she said, you hired me to be a bus monitor, but they also needed me to sub in classrooms because we always need people. And she said, I really like working with the children. So they encouraged me to get my child development associate credential. And I did that. And then, I was able to become, back then, she became a teacher assistant, and then she got her associate's degree and became a teacher. And she said, I like school too. So I kept going. I got my bachelor's degree. Then I got my master's degree. And she said, and then I actually am finishing my PhD now, and I'm a center director here in DC. And I said, that's really awesome. I'm so glad to hear about that. How about your kids? And she said, my 4th one has just started college. And they all had gone to college. So, I mean, those kinds of things, and that's the stuff that's really hard to measure, the change from in a parent and kind of self-regard, the parent-child relationship, getting degrees, changing income, all of those are things. They don't always all happen for all families, but many of them happen for most families. And we, people talk about a secret sauce, but the secret sauce is that we believe in children, we believe in their parents, and there's a world of opportunity. That concludes my stories.
No, I think that's a great story. And also, Victoria has shared a link in the chat for Mary and others that has all the citations you might ever wish for and ROI information. We're thrilled to provide additional detail on that as to be helpful, because this is in the end also a civic budget issue, and we want to provide as much support as we can for folks who invest in these kinds of solutions. Other questions?
Abigail, there's one in the chat that I'll try to maybe paraphrase and speak to, and that's that the relative ease or / complexity of a transit trip, the way I'm interpreting it, and it's I think and to interpret it cynically, which I'll do in order to address it, I'll say sometimes riding transit is complicated. You have transfers. It's going to take a lot of time to get where you're going, especially if it's not conveniently located. And then it also raises the point about even getting to the transit stop to begin with. All of those things are indeed challenges. And the way I would speak to that is we have to do as good a job as we can, in fact, a better job, making transit an attractive choice. If it's not an attractive choice, it's no surprise that people aren't going to use it unless they absolutely have to. But if we look to a future with climate goals and strong communities and all the other things we need to do, including serving persons who need the mobility, is just to make the transit option attractive and better. And that's what we're going to have to do. I know sometimes it's not. We're just going to have to provide frequent service, more convenient service, and connect through this mapping tool as best we can to where people need to go. I know that's a little general answer, but I'm sort of respecting the question. Sometimes the transit trip is not easy. The second part of it is I'd like to address too, and that's how about getting to the transit stop? Sometimes that's not easy either. My good friend Judy Shanley has offered a couple thoughts there, and Judy, if you're so moved, please come on and speak to pedestrian access, because I think that is an important part of the complete trip, as we call it, from origin to destination.
That's something I think I can also just chime in on from a Head Start perspective, and a value we can bring to this conversation in addition to the map is an understanding of exactly what's happening on the ground for the families that are most likely to be using public transit, the least likely to have cars and or reliable cars that can take them places as well, and bringing to that conversation a real understanding of where are the pockets of town where these families are most likely to live, and then where are they most likely to try to get as far as jobs go, as far as childcare and Head Start go, to really understand which of the bus routes, for example, are efficiently getting people across town. What are some of the trips that are the most difficult? And then even highlight places on the map where it looks like it's really close and convenient, but it's actually on two different sides of a highway. And so while it looks convenient, it's not. And all of that is really hard to get consistently in a map from data. But right on this call alone, we have lots of transit folks and we have lots of Head Start folks who are experts together in their community. I think by coming together and looking at all the centers, looking at the different routes and stops, we can fill in some of the gaps that are missing from each side to really understand what's needed.
Maybe one quick tag on to that is, and I'll be quick because there's other comments coming in, is that there is like a public involvement, element to transit planning. I know sometimes that's not easy. Some people are burdened with their own lives and don't have time, but we're trying to make that. We're trying to acknowledge that point and make it as easy as we can. So maybe even the Head Start offices are a source of input that we can look to for those challenges that people are facing. Thanks.
Abigail, this is Judy Shanley. Since Art mentioned me, maybe I'll just pipe in with some of the thoughts that I've put in the chat. When we think about transportation coordination and transportation planning, we don't often think about the sidewalks and pedestrian access. And now with a focus on complete streets and Vision Zero and all of these initiatives which look at pedestrian types of issues, I think it's important to have the people responsible for our sidewalks talking and coordinating with people responsible for our transit. And one of the challenges that has been apparent is there's two different bodies that are responsible for those things. And, you know, in some places there's better collaboration between fixing sidewalks and fixing transit agencies. And in other places, it's no one's responsibility. And so I think kind of having those entities, the pedestrian access people and the conversations with transportation planners is really important.
Thank you, Judy. That is such a core point. I'm so glad you raised that. And we have so enjoyed, we had a couple of conversations, I think, with one of your colleagues at NCMM. I really appreciate the work that you guys are leading on this topic. And echoing Victoria's point and what Art said as well, you know, Head Start offices are, at least in my experience, having now talked to a bunch of these other kinds of civic points of interest, community colleges and others, Head Start operators are genuinely unique in how close they are to the families that they serve. They know about the routes that they take. They know about the challenges. They know whether the bus cost is too much or too little, you know, whether they're ever going to be able to use on-demand transit, whether the zones that on-demand transit serve, in fact, even include their places of work or residence. It's a unique opportunity, you know, in I think this space to gain community feedback from folks who genuinely want to be in the conversation with you and who are charged as part of their responsibility as Head Start grant recipients to in fact do this work and try to knit together community resources. This is part of their job. And they are contending with other kinds of barriers and trying to overcome them for the families they serve every day. So talking to a friendly transit agency is a great day for everybody. Other questions? Just peering into the chat, but folks should feel free to shout out. It's a big group, which I'm so delighted by, but it means we may not see all the hands up. So offering another thought, you know, as we look out to October, you know, other kinds of commitments that we are interested in spotlighting include some of the things that we're seeing in the chat now, which are community passes and other kinds of you know, free access for Head Start families. You know, that's the kind of commitment we would love to be able to spotlight in October, even if it's already happening, or to help make connections to help provide a way for folks to connect with their Head Starts or transit agencies to make something like that happen. You know, fixed route. While our map can only show, you know, the locations of the stops and the centers, you know, transit accessibility, of course, encompasses much more than that. As Judy said, you know, not only sidewalk access, but also cost and route and frequency. Claire.
I'm calling from Western Massachusetts, which is a mix of urban and rural. Has a very balkanized, it's a very balkanized state in that there's no functional county government in most of the state. The RPAs don't serve every community in the state by a long stretch. So I feel like this is one part of a very complicated puzzle. And so in the part of our region that's urban, I can see us maybe making some headway here. But honestly, suburban and rural families, there has to be a different solution. And I hope Head Start will be open to, for instance, us being the transit provider for both the parent and the child. Get the kid to Head Start and then drive the parent to work. There's different ways to think about this. And so I'm hoping there's you know, it is a multiple choice question. And then the second piece of this is that in rural communities, you know, getting water in the road is more important than the sidewalk at this point. So, you know, and even some and the poorest communities often have the least amount of money to invest in infrastructure. So I want us to be really thoughtful about that. That's where the kids are, and that's where the infrastructure isn't. So
Claire, I'm so glad you raised both of those things. I don't want to get ahead of our federal partners, but I think I can share that those concerns are under active consideration at both FTA and OHS. As we think about, in particular, the opportunities and challenges to serve folks in rural communities, because, of course, you're dead on. That's a critical gap. And while we're able to share a bit about the yellow nodes on this call, I think, unfortunately, we're not able to share more about some of these other solutions that are cooking, but I think they're certainly occupying all of us as we think about it. And so we'd love to circle up with you about that separately.
I'd love to talk about that some more. And I also just need, we can't provide transportation because we can't hire drivers.
I have so many things to say and I can't say them all, but I would say I agree with you. I think in many cases, directly provided transportation services for children and families are probably the most cost effective and safe. Although I think transit's going to be an important piece of the puzzle too. And I think you have lots of opportunities for partnering and developing and diversifying what you do with your transportation services. Claire, you could email me if you want and we can talk more about it. Or
I'd love to talk offline sometime about that.
I'll
it's
put my
real challenge
email
for
in the
us.
chat, okay?
What's that?
I'll put my email in the chat.
Oh, and look at that. There's somebody from Western Mass here. That's great.
Hey, I want to make a quick comment too. That is such a, one of the points you said, Claire, is just rung with me, and it's so good a point. I hope that there's somewhere in the country that you have the challenge of getting your child to Head Start, and then you have the challenge of getting yourself
to work.
And it's like a double challenge.
That's
and might there be some kind of pilot program that we can somehow put a package deal together, saying we're not just going to help you with half of your problem or half of your challenge.
Well,
we're going to help you all the way here. And there has to be ways to look at things that way. So I'm going to do my best on follow up on that.
And Jessica, I see you put a note in the chat, but would you mind asking the question to the group? Because I think that's a really constructive question.
Yeah, I'm Jessica in San Francisco, and we, as our service standard, we use 1/4 mile of a stop as the area that's served by a route, or whatever routes serve that stop. And so just curious if that distance is a good measurement for thinking about Head Start centers.
So the standard, I think, so thank you again for that question. The standard that we are using for our map for Head Start, which, as Victoria said, is different from how we're thinking about community and technical colleges. What we're using for Head Start is 0.2 miles as the crow flies. It's definitely a downward biasing in our sample, because of course, sometimes there's a cut through path and sometimes there's a highway that you have to walk around. But that's the way that we've standardized it across our map. And so we think about that as being about the right distance. Obviously closer is always better because, as Victoria said, anybody who's tried to get a 2-year-old to go anywhere on any kind of schedule knows what a challenge that is, even with good weather. But, we think about this about 1,000 feet is tolerable. Erica? Oh, Erica, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yep, now is great.
My name's Erica and I live in Oklahoma. And we're in rural Oklahoma, so we do not have bus stops. But we provide public transit in our city limits. So one of the things that we have done is we partner with the parents to be able to get kids that do not have access to transportation to our Head Start centers. And then we do not charge those parents, so that way they will put them kids on the bus every day. And the kids still are able to make it to the Head Start centers, because our community action agencies, we have Head Start and public transit. So we do it as a collaboration. So that way these parents can get their kids to school every day. And then we try to find monitors and different people to help us on the bus. So that way, we can make sure the kids stay seated because, they're only 3. So, we worry about them a little bit more than some of our other passengers. But we try to use our paratransit buses and whatever's safe to get them to and from school every day.
That's fantastic. We would love to learn more about that. One of the things that we are doing for October is releasing a brief that is going to spotlight some of the creative solutions that we have heard about. And so now we're hearing another one. And so would love for you and anybody else who's working on this, who's got a creative idea, or even an idea that you think is not creative, but is working, to share them with us in the chat. And so that way we can chase you later. Because I think it's essential that, we all learn from each other on this. What works in one community actually might work in another and sometimes not. But the menu, I think, of opportunities on this is still being developed.
Abigail, maybe I'll mention quickly one other possible idea here. And you mentioned earlier demand response, and you were saying that was not really covered in your database. The traditional form of demand response in transit was called paratransit, but now more recently there's these new term micromobility, which is more called on demand. So it's not advanced reservation; it's more on demand, and we're figuring that out. It's call it the next frontier in a lot of transit systems, but that might open up some possibilities here for some of the Head Start trips. Another thing to maybe think about.
Absolutely. Other folks, questions? Requests to be connected with your counterparts? Commitments for October?
Abigail, was there anything that came out? Yeah, I think your earlier initiative was with community colleges. You might have covered that already, but I'll ask it perhaps a little pointedly. Was there any, call it epiphany, that came from that discussion? They would say, when we sat down with community colleges, they stumbled upon this light bulb.
No, I think that's a great question. And I think it's been, I think, fascinating for me and for Matt as we've moved to different topic areas, that the light bulb is in fact different in different places. This is not a uniform kind of challenge when you look at mobility, which of course is something that everybody in transit already knows, but is new to us as cartographers. So in the community college situation, one of the things that we noticed that was really distinctive is, of course, there's fewer community college locations. We're looking at 3,600 across the country. But it was almost in the places where it was an opportunity wedge, where it was their yellow node. Frequently, the stop was at a Walmart or a Market Basket or a grocery store of some other kind, a mile and a half from campus. So genuinely close, another point of interest where students, faculty, and staff would probably like to go regularly, but just beyond walking distance, even for somebody without mobility challenges in good weather. But on the other side of that, what we saw was that community colleges, and this was anecdotal, but answering your question, for community and technical colleges where there was good transit connectivity, where there was a stop on campus and the frequency lined up and the start times of the college classes seemed to align with the bus schedule suspiciously well. In all of those cases, we scratched the surface and we found a relationship, between the transit agency and the community college. Someone had made this a priority, and not in a big investment kind of way, but in a let's have coffee every once in a while kind of way and share the needs of our population and think about how community college students who are perhaps transit customers for life, if they're well served, how they need to access this, how faculty and staff need to access community transit. Conversely, we did find that in places where the bus stop was a mile and a half away, in many cases, the community college had never thought to call the transit agency. They're at least not nobody I could find had made that call or not made that call in recent history. There were some cases where transit agencies, came up to us and said, look, we've been trying to work with these guys forever and no one will return our calls, or we can't figure out their org chart. We don't know who to talk to, which of course is something that's not unique to higher education, but disproportionately frequent in higher education. There is an every wrong door approach as opposed to a no wrong door approach. And so that was distinctive in that sector. In Head Start, what we're finding is different, which is that, not every transit agency has heard of Head Start. And Head Starts, have in many cases not thought to reach out to their transit agencies, or have tried really hard, but the closest real estate they could find to the stop is in fact less than a mile away, but not quite walking distance. They've tried their best, but it's not always available to get real estate that's more proximate, particularly on a Head Start operator's budget. So, we're seeing, different patterns. We've also seen places where it's working great, it's totally integrated. Folks seem to know what they're doing. They're close with the transit agency. But we've not seen, I think, consistency across the board in that way, or even candidly, the kind of tight bucketing that we saw in higher ed. But also in Head Start, the conversation is more recent. Higher ed has been talking about our students are one flat tire away from dropping out for going on 30 years now. In Head Start, the conversation is a little more recent. And in some of the other fields we're looking at around grocery store access, the conversation is yet more nascent than that, at healthcare, et cetera. I know Michael has a hand up, and I think we've got some other folks with hands up as well. Michael, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think, obviously this call is about Head Start and transit making connections, but we've talked a lot about the community college initiatives also. And, one of the things that we're very proud of I'm at Golden Gate Transit in the Bay Area as well, is that one of the things we have started doing is working with our community colleges to address the issue of bus operator shortages. So, there's somewhere in my head, there's this vision of we're getting kids to Head Start, we're getting parents to community colleges where they're doing pre-apprenticeship programs to become bus operators as a career, as opposed to working more of what might be termed a dead-end job that is not likely to give them a good career. So it's almost like all of these things start to come together in your head and you think there's got to be a better way to do all of this. We're so close. We've got pieces. We're putting together pieces in different ways. And we're too soon into it to really see the fruits of our labor, but we are definitely seeing that as a pathway for parents as well as, and if we have Head Start facilities at community colleges, we can get people to community colleges, and we can use those community colleges as ways to increase opportunity for parents as well. So it's something we're very excited about as we move forward and try to resolve our lack of bus operators.
Michael, I'm so glad you raised that, because actually there's been some nascent discussions about strengthening the relationship between CDL training providers and Head Starts. Head Start is charged with improving family economic stability and improving training opportunities for parents. And so CDL has been raised, I think, in recent conversations as being another way that transit agencies could build partnerships and pipelines with their local Head Starts. And so that's another, facet, I'm thrilled you called it out here, because, I think we all see that as a special opportunity. Other folks or questions with hands up? So we're looking at the chat, with Lisa, asking as well about the coordination. Victoria and I spend a lot of time together these days. We have another project that we're working on, which is focused on relocating Head Start locations onto community college campuses, which not only, will help parents and their children on an economic mobility standpoint, but also will incidentally make it easier, I think, for transit agencies to serve them both. Certainly there's a transit gap for community colleges, but it's not as large as it is for Head Start. And of course, community colleges have a lot of people going to and from them every day who are either current or potential transit customers. So we're excited about that project. And I think Victoria dropped a link to it into the chat. That one was endorsed by the Washington Post editorial board actually this spring as being a high potential opportunity.
And I think we're coming up on time, but we should, I think Abigail, Art, and I will all drop our email addresses in the chat. We would love to keep hearing from you guys. If you want to be connected directly with the Head Start program in your area in particular, reach out to me and let me know where you are. And I'll loop in Art and we'll figure out exactly where, kind of what those Head Start providers are and how we can connect you. Hopefully some of you are actually together here on this call and just don't know it yet. But if your counterparts weren't able to join, we can still connect you to them. And
yeah, and most of all, thank you all for the work you're doing every day. You know, these two communities and these two memberships share, I think, tremendous goals around improving mobility, economic and social, for folks here in the United States. And we all really appreciate what you're doing. And also your willingness to come to a call like this in the middle of the afternoon when you got 10,000 other things to do. We look forward to partnering with you and connecting to celebrate your successes in October.